Welcome viewers. I welcome you to my show, News and Views. This is Janiser Ahmed from Millennium TV. USA. Today, the big news making the headlines is President Obama. He has conferred the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Vice President Joe Biden. This is highest civilian award that can be presented to any civilian official. But viewers, President Obama, he conferred this award with highest level of veneration that in the past has been conferred only to Pope John Paul II, Colin Powell, and former President Ronald Reagan. Viewers, as you know, the alliance, the camaraderie between President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, that has been very much, it was tremendous. There was a real, a remarkable bond of affinity between the President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. It was seen as a triumph of both of the individuals. Mm, Vice President Joe Biden, he referred to the fact while receiving the award that the office of the vice president, that is not perhaps as influential and strong as it is normally deemed. But President Obama, it was his personality and it was his leadership skills that he really gave him the opportunity to come forward, to step forward and lead the nation. President Obama also had the support of Vice President Joe Biden on certain issues of national importance and national security. For instance, on foreign policy, President Obama, he sought the help of Vice President Joe Biden. So in order to have a better understanding and be able to and better be able to cope with all those problems. Viewers, I must add that Vice President Joe Biden, he was seen as an expert on foreign policy. Foreign policy was seen as one of his strongest points, and it was because of those skills that he was able to serve the President Obama in a very skillful and artful manner. President Obama, while conferring the award, he said, "To know Joe Biden is to know love without pretense, service without self-regard, and to live life fully," President Obama said. So when he was addressing, welcome viewers. This is Janiser Ahmed. I'm from Millennium TV USA. I welcome you to my show, News and Views. Today we will be talking about one of the biggest news items making the headlines, and that is that President Obama, he has awarded Vice President Joe Biden with highest civilian award, and that is Presidential Medal of Freedom. And President Obama, he conferred the award with highest level of veneration that in the past has been conferred upon three individuals, mainly such as Pope John Paul II, Colin Powell, and former President Ronald Reagan. Viewers, President Obama was very much effusive. He was emotional while conferring the award. There was, as you know, President Obama during his tenure, he banked upon Mr. Vice President Joe Biden's abilities and his and services and his regard as for. Welcome viewers. This is Janiser Ahmed from Millennium TV USA. I welcome you to my show, News and Views. Today, the big news making the headlines is that President Obama has conferred the highest civilian award, Presidential Medal of Freedom, to Vice President Joe Biden. It was a ceremony held in the East Room of White House. It was attended by a segment of the press and other dignitaries. President Obama, when he stepped into the room, he was very much emotional, effusive, and he was very much excited. And he also had a surprise up his sleeve. He did not tell Vice President Joe Biden that he was going to confer that highest civilian award on him. And that later turned out to be a very happy surprise for Vice President Joe Biden. But President Obama was very much effusive, emotional, and he talked about his camaraderie, his friendship in the office and outside the office during those 8 years in office, when he was dealing with a whole variety and whole set of different problems ranging from foreign policy to domestic policy. And he told the audience that Vice President Joe Biden, he had proved himself to be a very effective companion, a very effective speaker, and a problem solver, a troubleshooter who would always come up with solutions for so many different problems facing President Obama. Viewers, President talked about Vice President Joe Biden, saying that to know Joe Biden is love without pretense, service without self-regard, and to live life fully. Addressing, Mr. Obama also said that he, during certain issues relating to foreign policy that had come up as a very big challenge to the U.S. National issues, President Obama was able to bank upon Vice President Joe Biden's shoulders. He had always somebody to fall upon and get his advice. Viewers, Vice President Joe Biden also played a very effective role as an advisor during the Afghanistan and Iraq war because of his specialization in foreign policy. Foreign policy came to be known as one of his strongest points. Vice President Joe Biden helped President Obama, and during the ceremony, Mr. Biden, he said that there were times that they had been through thick and thin. There were times when they had to really, argue over the finer points of an issue, and where they would have to argue over a point. But President Obama said that they emerged victorious. They settled those issues. It was an argument, but they were able to fix those issues, and they were able to form a very effective relationship in the office. President Obama, of course, referred to his friendship with Vice President as a kind of a bromance. But viewers, there is a whole history of how Vice President Joe Biden, he emerged from a whole set of personal tragedies that really were hindering his rise towards personal success. Joe Biden had been serving in the Senate for a very long time. He spent around 36 years as U.S. Senator from Delaware. And he placed special focus on economy and foreign policy issues. In 1970, he won his first election to Newcastle County office. And aged 29, he pulled off a very surprising upset victory against incumbent Jay Boggs in a race for U.S. Senate. But before he could sworn in as the 5th youngest senator in office, he had to face a personal tragedy. That December, his wife and 13-month-old daughter, they were killed in a very terrible road accident. 2 of his sons were hospitalized. It was a tractor-trailer crash when it flowed into their station wagon. But rather than move to D.C., Joe Biden, he decided to commute by train every day so he could spend more time with his sons. He remarried in 1977 to school teacher Jill Jacobs. Viewers, that was his personal journey towards success, but he had to face a number of different, whole set of personal tragedies. He came out of those problems. He fought those tragedies, and that is a character, sort of a redeeming feature that was appreciated by President Obama during the ceremony. President Obama referred to him as somebody who is a survivor, somebody who had really the strength to cope not only with his personal problems, his tragedies, but also help the nation, the American public, on the national stage and represent their nation at so many different international forums. There was also a moment during the ceremony when President Obama, he tried to uh, be a little humorous. He tried to bring in a little humor and color into the ceremony. He referred to Vice President Joe Biden as somebody with whom he was having a kind of a bromance, and the audience, they erupted in a kind of a laughter. But also later on, when President Obama, he really told that he was going to confer the highest civilian award, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, on Vice President Joe Biden. Mr. Biden became emotional and effusive. He broke down and he turned backwards and he wiped his tears because he was really moved by the news. And perhaps that showed that he did not know, and that President Obama, he had a surprise in store for him. He was really happy. He wiped his tears, he came back onto the stage, and then the award was presented to him. It was conferred onto him. And he was really, really happy. He appreciated how his relationship with President, it had helped improve his own persona. He also acknowledged and rather said that he had been, because of those set of personal tragedies, during his lifetime and his term in office, he had leaned on different people, on his family members, and also on President Obama. Then he also referred to certain moments when he was in office and he was working with President Obama, for instance, in the Situation Room, in the Oval Office, and in other areas when there were points of argument. But he said that while they had their differences, President Obama would always listen to him, and he would always give him he would go an extra mile to listen to him and to take his input and make them into a kind of, make them a part of his own policies. So viewers, with that tremendous journey of camaraderie and friendship, it comes to an end. It has also shown us the personal side to the Vice President of the United States of America. To the world, he has been known as a statesman, a hard-working, bookworm, but a very expert analyst on foreign relations. But there we also saw his personal side, that there was a human element to him. He is widely respected among the journalist community because he is always so approachable, and he is always willing to talk to the journalists. With that, viewers, we'll be bringing our first segment to an end. Don't go anywhere. We'll be just taking a short break. We'll be just right back. Welcome back, viewers. We are now into our next segment, the confirmation hearings on the Capitol Hill. They move on, they continue to go on, and it has now become a little obvious that some of the President-elect Donald Trump's nominees, they perhaps are not on the same page with Mr. Trump. The nominee for the next Secretary of Defense, General retired James Mattis, he said he placed Russia as the first among the list of countries that face a real danger and threat to the United States. When he was asked questions about threats coming from Russia, he was very much categorical, and he did not mince his words in saying about and in telling the congressional members and senators about the dangers and the threat that was posed from Russia. General Mattis has been known as a very hardworking and a very deliberate kind of individual. His role in the previous wars in Iraq, especially vis-a-vis Iran, that has been appreciated by a segment of analysts. When he was working with President Obama, he had differences over the Iran policy, because General Mattis was of the view that Iran needed to be dealt with a stronger arm because of what it was doing to spread militancy across Middle East. General Mattis had a very close eye on whatever was happening in the Middle East, and particularly what was done at the behest of Iran. He considered Iran to be a major threat, and he was very specific in pointing towards the militant cells that were being propagated and spread at the behest of Tehran. Viewers, that is seen as a kind of an emerging point of difference vis-a-vis what President-elect Donald J. Trump has been saying. He has been, of course, making a very friendly posture towards Kremlin. He is saying that if he can find a friend in Putin, what's wrong with that? And even he has been taking difference of opinion with a whole variety of analysts and people and even media on the question of having or improving relationship with Kremlin. But here, this is one of his major nominees, the nominee for the Secretary of Defense, and how that would impact when once he becomes the Secretary of Defense, that remains to be seen. Viewers, also, it must be mentioned that the nominee for the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, the former Exxon Mobil CEO, he also was asked questions on how, on his policies that he would really enforce when he would assume office. But he said that he would renegotiate the deal that President Obama had struck with Iran. Then he was referring to the nuclear deal. Now that again is seen as a kind of a diversion from what President-elect Donald J. Trump has been saying, because he has been saying it very categorically that he intends to scrap any deal, or he intends to undo the nuclear deal with Tehran. Whether that was meant to really convince the senators or in order to tell them that his policy was pragmatic, or perhaps that was meant to really diffuse the attention from the real issues, that nobody knows and nobody can tell. But this difference of opinion seems to be emerging, because this position is now he would take up the office of the Secretary of State, and that after the President of the United States is arguably the most important and influential offices in the US. Viewers, also during the confirmation hearings, Representative Mike Pompeo, who is the nominee for Central Intelligence, he was asked a whole set of questions on certain interrogation techniques, or the enhanced interrogation techniques that President-elect Donald J. Trump has said that he would enforce when he would take office. He was asked questions on waterboarding. But viewers, also on this point, when he was asked those questions, Mr. Pompeo made it very clear. He said that he would not go against anything that the law does not allow, saying that he would not permit of these techniques, these enhanced interrogation techniques, such as waterboarding. Now this again flies in the face of the policy that has been seems to be appearing from the other end of the spectrum, that has been propagated by a different set of opinion makers. So viewers, this difference of opinion, how positively or how negatively it will affect the new administration, it really remains to be seen. But the difference of opinion, that at the end of the day really benefits the style of governance that any administration might adopt. It is the beauty of democracy that there prevails any certain degree of difference of opinion. If Sean Spicer, the incoming Secretary of State, he was asked questions on Mr. Trump's nominees and their views, which are quite different from his own views, and how he would react to that. So he said that President-elect Donald J. Trump was not asking for colognes in selecting his senior advisors. But he also added that at the end of the day, each one of them is going to pursue a Trump agenda and a Trump vision. Viewers, it has become very obvious that the new team administered by President-elect Donald J. Trump, it has the capability to go on and deliver the job. For instance, Rex Tillerson, before he appeared for the Senate hearings, he had been lambasted by a section of the press for his incapability, because one segment of the press, they really criticized him as somebody who was extremely good at dealing with business affairs, because he had been the former chairman, the chief, the CEO of ExxonMobil. And they said that while he could do business making and he could do big deals and all that, his credentials as somebody who could deal with United States foreign policy and become the face of the United States all across the world, they really cast doubts on that. But the way he answered those different set of questions, they really affirmed his role and his the ability to really take up the office and do the job very effectively. Viewers, also he had to face a whole volley of very bitter questions from Senator from Florida, Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio, even at the end of the Senate hearings, he talked to a set of reporters and said that he right now was still uncertain whether he would give him the vote of approval or not. And why he said that is because during the hearings, Senator Rubio, he really asked him in a very direct manner how he considers Russia, or whether he considers Russia to be a threat to the United States or not. And the answers given by Mr. Tillerson, they were very much diplomatic. But of course, that is how a diplomat is supposed to converse. A diplomat is supposed to talk in terms of diplomacy. He at times he has to be direct, but also he has to be indirect, and that is really the skill of a good statesman. But Senator Rubio, he was not. He had his questions, the lingering questions. They kept coming back, and his doubts, they also kept coming back. So he fired another volley of questions at him. This time around, he asked him how he saw Mr. Putin. Did he, or would he, when he would take up the office, would he be able to label him as a war criminal? But Mr. Tillerson, he again was composed and calm, and he said that he would be very much cautious in the use of that term. Again, Senator Rubio, he was not happy with the answers that he got, and so he held his vote of approval. And then later he said that he was still undecided, and he would do what is best for democracy and what really needs to be done. So now people are asking, what if the senator really holds his vote or doesn't give him the vote of approval? He is a Republican senator, of course, and that really adds value to the entire process. But viewers, this process of democracy, this itself shows how transparent the entire process is. On the other hand of the spectrum, there is this view, there is this concern that these Senate confirmation hearings, they have gone on without the completion of the background checks or the completion of the report from the Government Ethics Office. The financial disclosure form, they also have to be reviewed and a final assessment made about the entire business and the persona and whatever is related to them. The entire report has to come up, and then the Senate can confirm those nominations. For instance, the background checks in the past, the nominees whose background checks were pending, President Obama, he deferred their confirmations. and only when their confirmations, the checks came, then he appointed and confirmed those nominations. But this time around, President-elect Donald J. Trump has said that he doesn't want to waste time. He needs those important positions to be filled as quickly as possible so that he can get away to business right from the day he assumes office. There are certain important policy issues that are already being debated. For instance, Obamacare. The Republicans, they have said, including Vice President-elect Mike Pence, he has said that repealing Obamacare, it would be the first order of business on the first day that the government takes office. So that has naturally, where it has unnerved President Obama and his administration, it really shows the commitment and the conviction of the Republicans that they want, then they intend to follow up on their promises made to the American voters. Viewers, this whole process, this really confirms and it really affirms the voters and the American public's confidence in democracy. It is a strong process, and it shows that even the individuals who are going to be nominated for one of the strongest offices in the country, they also have to go through those processes of background checks like the ordinary American citizen, the ordinary individual. And that really it really firms one's confidence in the democratic process. Viewers, with that, we'll be taking a very short break. We'll be just right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, viewers. We are into our last segment, and in this segment, I will be telling you about how to spot fake news. Viewers, as you know, this is the age of internet. Perhaps we are moving on to a next stage of information. There has been an explosion of information. There are so many channels and so many avenues of information on the internet that virtually it is very, very hard to tell a fake news item from a real piece of news. Viewers, in a very latest event, California Assemblyman Jimmy Gomez, a Democrat, he has introduced a bill in the Assembly on Wednesday that would require the state to establish curriculum, standards and framework to teach civic online reasoning to middle and high schoolers. The intention is to enable young people and youngsters the ability to judge the credibility and quality of information found on the internet, including social media. The bill also says that with so much information on the internet, it can be difficult to tell a fake news item from real news. Viewers, why the Assemblyman, Mr. Jimmy Gomez, he has felt the need to introduce that bill. It has become more than obvious that there is a need to regulate the flow of information. What is also happening, a phenomena has been observed that because an item of fake news that is far more easily spread than an item of real news, it generates a lot more number of clicks. A greater number of people are able to view an item of fake news because of the kind of sensationalism that is attached to it. So what has been happening, particularly during this presidential campaign, is that whoever the perpetrators of fake news and whatever their motives, they had been using fake news to really perpetuate their own ideas and whatever they wanted to achieve. For instance, in certain areas, it has been observed that people who spread out fake news on the internet, they generated a lot of capital because so many people were viewing those blogs or websites. So those websites and those blogs, they were generating a lot of income, and so that also came up as a possible motive, as a possible reason for the people to propagate fake news. But also fake news has been used by political rivals against each other. Most notably, during the presidential election campaign, we saw that there was a very, very damaging news item making the rounds, that it was there was a blog, and it was purported on that blog that a certain pizza hotel restaurant in Washington D.C. that was engaged in making child pornography, and then that whole event and incident, it was related to Hillary Clinton's campaign, purporting that perhaps Hillary Clinton's campaign was related to that gruesome happening at that pizza restaurant. So that really left a very bad impact for President Hillary Clinton's campaign. It really damaged her prospects of making a good performance in the elections. Similarly, viewers, there have been other events of fake news items. Fake news item can be intended to sour relationship between the two countries. We also saw that there was also a fake news doing rounds even in United States, because when President Obama he hit back at Russia with a set of sanctions, there was this one item of fake news saying that the Kremlin had shut down an Anglo-American school in Russia as a result of the American sanctions. But it turned out that Russia had done no such act, that the school was still operating and people were still going and attending the school. So whoever did that, perhaps there was a reason behind that, but it shows the effectiveness of fake news. In latest research polls and data, it has become more obvious that an item of fake news, it would spread more rampantly and more commonly than an item of real news. Also, viewers, the advertisement aspect to the whole issue, that must also not be neglected. Huge capital is generated from ads and advertisements placed on those blogs and websites. So there has to be a mechanism, but whenever there is a talk of mechanism or regulating the flow of information, of course the debate turns towards the freedom of press. And of course, when it comes to freedom of press, it becomes even more harder to really launch a crackdown on such blogs and websites. But viewers, this is the beauty of democracy. There will be regulation, because regulation is now the need of the hour, as this assemblyman, Mr. Jimmy Gomez, he has introduced a bill in the California State Assembly. Viewers, there are few tips for recognizing or in order to spot an item of fake news, and I will bring to your notice those tips. So they are: number one, always double check the URL. If there is something wrong in the URL, or if you sense that the spellings are not, do read up the spellings. If, for instance, the domain name, there is something wrong with that, like .com, it is placed somewhere else, definitely that means that it could be an item of fake news. So viewers, URL is very, very important. Be always very cautious before reading anything. What is its URL? Also viewers, also be very, very cautious and be very, very wary of the photograph placed on the blog or the website. The first question that you must be asking yourself is that, does it look unrealistic? If there is an iota of the fact that it looks unrealistic, be very cautious about it. Be skeptic about it. Do not trust the news source. So viewers, also check your sources. Now sources, by sources I mean your conventional sources of news. From where do you get the news? Who are the channels from where the news is coming? Is it your national daily? Is it your national news channel? Is it your local news channel or your local news network? Okay, fine, you can trust them. But if it's not, or if the name looks fishy or suspicious, like for instance you have not heard about a name of a website or a news channel, do not believe that, because It is these kinds of blogs and websites purporting and presenting themselves as news channels that really are doing the really tremendous damage. Viewers, also install a browser plugin. This is something that can come really handy and effective in letting you know whether the news source is right or no, wrong, because it would have the software to detect a fake news item or an item that is not traditionally coming from the regular media houses. So viewers, we hope you liked today's show. Please give us your feedback. This is Janiser Ahmed from Millennium TV. Until the next show, goodbye.